heroes. She is Dr. Tamara Crawford. She became interested in working with older adults while in graduate school. She completed a dissertation on the impact of attachment style on caregiver burden while working at the Older Adult and Family Center in Menlo Park, California. After a few years of training and work under Dolores Gallagher Thompson and Larry Thompson, she knew she wanted to be a geropsychologist and wanted to work among geriatric teams within the VA system. She received her postdoctoral training at the Palo Alto VA in geropsychology and palliative care, then spent the next 10 years engaging in that work at the VA in Durham, North Carolina, and recently relocated to beautiful Sheridan, Wyoming, to continue her clinical interests in these areas and a little closer to her two other favorite states, which are Texas and California. She's a Texas girl, and our Vanessa that works with us is also a Texas girl, so they often visit. But please welcome Dr. Tamara Crawford.
It's true, I am Texan, and I'm one of those Texans that is currently refraining from singing you the Texan state song. But if you ask me later, I don't care where we are, I'll sing it for you. And I sing it to my husband whenever I see a Texas license plate. So I apologize. And who I have with me is Heidi Maxwell, and Heidi is a psychology trainee, an intern, to become a psychologist when she completes her dissertation and her internship. Heidi is wanting to specialize in geropsychology and neuropsychology, read dementia care. And so she's on a rotation with me right now, so I've asked her to come up here to practice advocacy. And so this is what you're doing here. Thank you. So Heidi has been through these slides before. The title is Living, Loving, and Loss. I know that I'm wearing clothes that don't match and a tie, but Stella did give me this tie to wear. I think she knew I'd say, sure. And part of it is because a lot of the work that I do is breaking bad news to family members. You can't hear me? My parents say that I'm usually too loud. Okay. So keep it up there. Absolutely. All right. So anything you want to add?
Okay.
Not yet?
Okay.
So the first thing what we'll do is start with the definition of palliative care and end of life. Palliative, and if you didn't guess from our slides, we'll be talking about living, loving, and loss, meaning end of life and approaching end of life. And one reason I like to wear these purple outfits is to offset the seriousness of this topic. Similar to what our laughter therapy colleagues shared. So, palliative care. I like to start out with this because I believe that if you are receiving comfort care for any situation that you can't automatically make go away or take a pill for or exercise through surgery or a spiritual experience, but you're still wanting comfort and management or somebody to say, I'm going to be there with you, I think that's palliative care. And what we're doing and what medicine is doing, along with many other disciplines, is trying to incorporate more palliative care in the aging process. That can start from age 0 if you are born into this world with a disease that needs heavy management and can limit your life in some way, whether that be the quality of your life or your lifespan. But for what I do in geropsychology, we look at end of life through the last 1 to 5 years, the last 1 to 2 years, the last weeks and months. And if you're choosing hospice or not, we also look at end of life through the last weeks to days to hours. As you might imagine or have experienced, there's different needs in each of those places. With the 1 to 5 years, Heidi, what do you think makes the 1 to 5 years different from the 1 to 2 years?
Well, with the 1 to 5 years, you're still doing more like you're shrinking of tumors, you're still applying, I guess, some curative methods in some ways, but not in the hospice, but it applies more to palliative care. So if you're life limited and it's chronic, you're going to be doing more care that's aimed at building that person's independence or protecting that independence for as long as possible.
So basically making it so that you can take a cross-country trip even with medical needs accounted for, like oxygen. Yeah. The last 1 to 2 years, it gets harder to go to the grocery store. The last weeks to months, it gets harder to leave the lazy boy, is what I've noticed. A lazy boy often helps with breathing. It angles you up, so people are often sleeping. And what we do with families is we tell families this is okay. One of the other reasons I dress loudly is just to make sure people are forewarned that I'm all about outing the elephant in the room. You know, I live life loud and I invite others to live life loud. Because if you're not living life loud enough, you may have hidden suffering. And there's a lot of hidden suffering with death and dying. Because if you say the words death or dying in your family, for example, and there's somebody who's really sick, people may get afraid that you might trigger tears, outbursts, anger, avoidance, maybe put an end to a delicious dessert. So what we try to do is we try to go into people's homes or invite people into our office to ask the questions or say the things that they're afraid to say so that they can receive that comfort care, so that they can know it's okay if a person is in a lazy boy and aren't able to get up anymore.
I think it is.
It is on.
It is on. Okay, there it is. I think it's also that grieving and loss is often considered as an after the fact kind of thing, but it also occurs in the process. And so just honoring that and helping people to develop identities around that and to process through that life event as it's occurring.
So are you saying that there's stages that you go through even before a person passes?
I am.
Okay. So that was palliative care in general, and palliative care is not an insurance or Medicare covered program. It's a philosophy of care that I would want for myself or my family. It doesn't mean you have to choose a specific treatment. The only thing palliative care promises is comfort care. It can be curative, can be non-curative, but comfort care and interdisciplinary care. So that you're not just speaking with a physician or you're not just speaking with a social worker, but you're also incorporating physical therapy, occupational therapy, chaplain support, pharmacy, and social work and psychology. Speech, dietitian, all of those. Now, hospice care is an insurance, it's a program, so it's defined by the government's use of funds to apply to end-of-life care if you elect it. It also offers an interdisciplinary treatment team and a wider range of medical options to treat pain or discomfort. Unlike palliative care, treatments for curative purposes are stopped. At that point in time, the treatments are seen to be not helpful no matter what, and may have been stopped even if you didn't elect for hospice. But in general, hospice care, there's if you're electing for hospice, the stopping of treatments gets rid of some of the confusion about what the goals of care are. Sometimes treatments are uncomfortable. For example, aggressive treatments are uncomfortable, and that's different from hospice's philosophy. Now, there are some aggressive treatments, such as radiation or surgery, that can still occur in hospice. One example that I give is if a person has a type of cancer where there's a tumor that begins growing in the airway, which is very uncomfortable, very painful, but radiation can shrink it, and the person would like to at least shrink it in their last months, weeks to days. Hospice allows for treatments like that, because that is not as confusing. There you go. Now, we're going to be talking about three types of grief. The first type of grief is anticipatory grief, and then there's normal grief, normal bereavement, and then there's complicated bereavement. When we're talking about all of these, there's different types of losses people can have. So I'll go back and start with losses that we can have at any age. We can have a loss of your car or driving, a loss of the ability to go shopping, hobbies, health, pets, families, and friends, your community status, or continence. By continence, I mean the ability to wait until you can get to a bathroom, or the ability to go to a bathroom easily so that your continence is not threatened. And with certain illnesses or limitations in mobility, that can decline. What we like to promote is what Heidi was alluding to before about a full lifestyle. We want to promote independence as much as possible, and independence in the things a person wants to do, but what we often find is with some illnesses, continence can be threatened, for example, and a person can start doing what?
Well, they can have accidents, like with in like spinal cord injury, for example, and that can happen at any stage in life.
Or multiple sclerosis.
Multiple sclerosis.
And with that, with the threat of accidents, people can start to stay indoors, not go out, not socialize. And what we want to do is honor the fact that a person is having a loss, a functional loss, and still promote independence as much as possible. So we try to talk to people about that. The other thing is, the other biggie up there's quite a few biggies, but pets, family, and friends. The older I get, the more loved ones I'm losing. And that's expected to continue for all of our lifespans. That's the general rule of living. But driving.
Or people who are staying behind while, so like the pets in older age, when someone is getting close to maybe actively dying, they may wonder what's going to happen to their pets, and so there may be a grieving process for them as well, and just learning like what's going to happen to my pet when I'm gone.
That's true, actually. We at the VA were working with a person who had a fast-moving type of disease and caught that person off guard and caught his life off guard, and he was afraid of not only leaving behind his pet, but also his motorcycle and sidecar. And so even though we thought he had weeks to days, he'd say, I gotta get back to Casper. I gotta see about that motorcycle and sidecar. And a part of us, the treating team, wanted to do what our society does, which is say, that's not relevant anymore. Don't worry about that. Just rest and try to eat something and be comfortable. But the other part of us was also saying, can we get him to Casper so we can put it in a garage? The sidecar and the motorcycle. Can we talk to the family? Can we talk them into this difficult trip? Because loss is not rational. Love is not rational. Loss is not rational. And for those who think that losing a car or being separated from a car is rational, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who grieve their cars or loss of driving quite a bit. When we have health problems, that anticipatory grief starts. The limbs, mobility, and organ functioning, wellness, those are the threats that we're experiencing, the threats to those things. If I have diabetes and I have a very bad sore on my toe, will I lose my foot or my leg? If I have liver failure, what's going to happen next? Sometimes when we have health problems, ourselves or our family members may experience guilt. We see this often with cancers, if a person has smoking in their history, or type 2 diabetes. A lot of people can feel guilty. Gosh, if I hadn't had that piece of cake that one time, I wouldn't have type 2 diabetes. And so we like to share with people, the guilt part is a natural, similar to what the other Dr. Cropper said. Guilt, when we experience a trauma or a loss, it's there, the emotion is there, and then our brain tries to fill in that emotion with something that sounds reasonable. So there's the pain of guilt as well. And we try to tell people, watch out for those who come up to you and want to help you make sense of something and say, see, you shouldn't have had that piece of cake that one time. No, that's not how you want to fill your day. When we have health problems, we also think about, what does this mean for my mortality? If I have a new diagnosis of emphysema, what does this mean? What does this mean for my 2-year-old granddaughter? Will I be able to see them graduate? What does this mean for my relationships? Will people still want to be around me if I have to carry oxygen? Will I be slowing people down? Who am I now? Identities change. What is my self-worth?
Yeah, and that's baseline basically for any kind of neuropsychological functioning. Like, we're always trying to look into the foreseeable future and think, what does this mean for my life? What does this mean for things that I need to do? And if you think about it, it's really survival oriented to think that way. It makes sense.
Yeah. Some of the things that we ask people when they experience loss is to think about the past losses. How have you gotten through that? Or did you get through those past losses? And what more work needs to be done? How does this experience compare? What's different? What's more uncomfortable? What's less uncomfortable? How do I let go of old goals and develop new ones? That's a biggie for grief. Will others let me be the changed person I have become? And that we put that out there because sometimes people do not want you to be the changed person you've become. And yet, all of us, I hope, continue developing and growing until we're not developing and growing anymore. How do I keep up with my medical care and go through this pain and loss? Meaning, do I cancel my dental appointments? Do I cancel my appointments because I can't leave the house, my general doctor's appointments? What do I do with these grief symptoms? I was a caregiver for so many years. We had a bedtime routine. My bedtime routine doesn't exist anymore. Or why would I make bacon and eggs every morning if my loved one isn't going to be sitting next to me eating them with me? What's the point? What do I do with all of this sadness? Will it ever go away? So, those are a lot of things that happen in anticipatory grief. In geropsychology, there are a lot of caregivers of loved ones with memory problems, and sometimes it's the type of memory problems that get worse and worse and worse, and you're losing more and more of that person's personality, more and more of that person's partnership, more and more of that person's identity. And sometimes people feel guilty for saying, oh my gosh, I'm already grieving that person and they're standing right next to me. I know this sounds funny, but it's like they're already gone. I do what I need to do and I provide with love to honor the relationship, but that person is already gone. What do I do with that? Is that normal? Is it normal?
Very normal. Also, they can feel irritated because they'll have fights with loved ones and about things that happened earlier that loved one does not remember. And that can also impact that grieving and loss and exacerbate it.
Yeah, that's the complicated part of complicated grief, when there's a troubled part of the relationship, or the whole relationship was troubled. Maybe you have a sibling that you're faced with losing or have lost, and you didn't have that close relationship. That's not uncommon. And so that's the complicated part of grief, when you can't walk and say, I love them, I told them everything I wanted to tell them, they love me, they told me everything they wanted me to know, and we had a beautiful goodbye, even though I missed them so much. That's a beautiful grief story. The complicated grief story is, I love them, but man, they were so difficult, and I feel some relief. Or even with caregiving, if it's extended and really, really difficult, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping better, is that okay? Is that okay that I can breathe a little bit more? I'm sad, but I feel better. So there's complicated parts of grief as well. Before there is death and dying, oftentimes there's somebody who's breaking the news to you. And you can maybe know that grief is coming, but when somebody says it out loud that this is going to happen, it's that first tidal wave. It's that first tidal wave. I remember my mother-in-law a couple of years ago had this diagnosis of cancer. and she was getting it worked up, and then she sent me an email and said, hey, they say it's malarian cancer. Can you look that up for me? And I looked it up, and I looked up ovarian cancer, and I didn't know ovarian cancer that well. I didn't know it could be very, very fast moving. So I'm reading up on it, and then I'm telling her, oh man, this is ovarian cancer. And so for our family, we were at different stages. Some of us were like, no. We've got family members who've been living with cancer for many, many years. We're going to do this. And some of us were hiding because we were thinking, oh, I was hiding. I was thinking, oh man, this is going to hit us hard. It's already hitting me hard. This is going to be violent, for our family emotionally. So I think about this not just from an individual or their immediate spouse or close relative, but I think about it in terms of the whole family. How's everybody handling it every stage of the way? How in line are we with our medical providers? I think our social workers at the VA and in the community do a great job of getting that communication going and maintaining its work. And when you're told that something's coming, how do you sustain yourself? Whether it's 15 years, 10 years, a year, or even less than that. How do you sustain yourself? How do you get through your routine? How do you maintain your routine, your health, your exercise? And the reason we want you to sustain yourself is because there is a hereafter. In the type of grief that we want to push people towards, the normative grief, your regular bereavement, it's limited to about 2 years, what the research shows. And do you remember my analogy for it?
I do. It's a beautiful analogy. So it's like a tidal wave, and at first it hits you and it knocks you over, and then I forget the timeline, but like in the next
The first 6 months, whenever that grief hits you, it knocks you over and drags you out to the ocean.
Yes. And then in the next 6 months, it may knock you down, but you get back up.
Mm-hmm. And you're still close to shore.
Still close to shore. But in the 2 years following, it just kind of laps at your feet.
That's right. So that grief wave gets smaller and smaller. You never forget the person. I think you all know that. But you're not knocked down sobbing in the middle of a grocery store as much in that 2-year mark. So I generally go by 6 months. It's not exact. But we have that 2-year mark from research, and I like to keep to it, because if it's 3 years, 4 years, and you're still knocked down by a tidal wave and drug out to sea, come see us. Come see us, because there is joy in life after grief. There just is. I don't know why, but I see people go through it all the time. Our family's gone through it too. There is, regardless of the circumstances. Now,
I think it's also important to note that grief is not a linear thing. So you may get better and you may have really bad days and you may have really good days. And even after that 2-year mark, you can have days where it knocks you over. But it's about how frequently is it doing that.
And the other thing to know too, in case your friends get worried, is it does mimic depression symptoms. So your sleep's off, your eating can be off, you can eat more, you can eat less. I ate jars of peanut butter. You can isolate. I never ate jars of peanut butter before, but I remember I was having a conversation with my husband with putting peanut butter in my mouth, and I was like, but I'm a psychologist, and I'm crying like this. Grief works in mysterious ways. There's no mechanical way to go through it. It is organic. I guess that example was me trying to go through it mechanically, like I'm doing all the right things. The book says to do this, do this. But it is organic. So I think one of the things I need to do is keep to a routine. Keep to a routine, and so every morning I get up and exercise to keep my mood going. And sometimes I'd be on my bike, and all of a sudden I would just be sobbing. And that's just grief. But it eventually just ebbed away. It just ebbed away. There are ways to complicate grief, and it's the same as, so the other Dr. Crawford, he specializes in PTSD. I do not. I do geropsychology, he does not, but there's overlaps in coping. So the same ways that you can complicate PTSD by avoidance, drinking, overeating without checking yourself, or taking too many sleeping pills or any other kinds of pills, or trying medication alone without any processing, any thinking, any talking, sharing with people. Those things can complicate grief and prolong it, or give you other side effects, like the 15 pounds with the peanut butter. It's life, right? And what you want to look for is, with health, is increasing independence with grief management. So after that first 6 months, little bits of independence that you notice or that others notice. So that's what I was talking about with the complicated grief. A person can be stuck and the symptoms stay severe. Interpersonal conflicts, not letting other people talk about it, can be a sign of complicated grief. But we expect complicated grief with traumatic events, with unforeseen events that took your loved one away, or with complicated relationships, and we're here to help. And I say we, and I'm not just speaking for the VA, but I'm speaking for the Senior Center for Sheridan. Wow, what a city to move to for resources. It's wonderful. They do have groups at the Senior Center as well, for different types of losses like cancer. Again, we went through the maladaptive coping strategies. These are the things we do not endorse. We don't endorse trying to rush through your grief like I did. I tried to. And if you have changes in your diet, feel free to consult your medical provider, just so that when you're out of the grief, out of it mostly, you don't have another issue that you're dealing with, or you're already on top of that. But we do expect changes in appetite and activity. We just don't want them to be prolonged so that you raise any other health risk factors for when you really want to feel ready to be enjoying life again. That's a way by itself. What we might hear from others when we're grieving. Many people do say, move on. Like, it's over, you're done talking about it. You told me this story 5 times, you don't need to tell it anymore. Or time heals everything. They're with God now. It's okay, you don't have to cry. And what I say is, if that's your belief that they are with God, and you feel like crying and being angry, why fight? Why fight it? Stop crying. It's time to feel better. Go and enjoy yourself. I cry all the time, and so I would cry even if I was going to enjoy myself doing something. So what I would say is just keep to a general routine. You can ease your routine back a little bit, but just keep to a general light routine. Maybe you select certain people that you want to hang out with for the near future, but you let yourself grow back to your full crowd of people when you're ready. And maybe avoid people a little bit if there is that pressure to move on. If you're feeling like that pressure to move on, no need to fight a person's, feeling the pressure to get over it, there's no need to fight that person or argue with them. Just give them a break and go with others who will let you breathe this in the meantime.
It's important to know who is safe to be around and who is not safe to be around. If there are people who are pressuring you to move on quickly, who are making you feel worse and keeping you from being in a place where you can process that grief, then avoid them.
That's it. What questions do any of you have about anticipatory or regular grief or complicated grief? Yes, sir.
You mentioned hospice. Is that prescribed by the doctor or how does that work?
Anybody can ask for hospice if you're told that you have an illness and that there's no more treatments for it and you're wanting more support. A physician can put in an order for it, but if you have anybody else on your medical team, social work, psychology, anybody can communicate to your medical team and should communicate to your medical team that you would like hospice services explained to you in case you'd like to accept them.
Medicare covered?
It is Medicare covered. Billy, am I giving the right information?
Medicare covers the medical care part of it, they don't cover the moving forward part of it, and need to go inpatient, but they do cover the medical part of it.
And there is in-home hospice and hospice in hospitals and hospice in some facilities. Any other questions?
Is there anything you really want us to take away from this topic? Is there anything that's coming up for you right now that we should know?
Grief is normal. Grief is a part of life. It hits us at any age. People at different age groups are going to experience it in different ways. 4-year-olds, 9-year-olds, no reason to exclude any age group or any gender either. And culturally, grief has different practices. Different cultures have different practices for how to grieve. And for my family, it's having a big party and then telling jokes about the person after we did the 2 or 3 hour Catholic service. And for other people, it's more solemn. So there's different cultural practices, but everybody grieves in their own way as long as nobody's getting hurt, nobody's being maligned, your health is not going by the wayside. Do not be afraid to go through grief and come find us if you're having difficulties. All right. Thank you all.